The night unfolds like a dark velvet curtain, thick with clouds and soaked in rain. The world outside is quiet, almost unnaturally so, as if holding its breath for something unseen. Raindrops patter rhythmically against the window pane, soft at first, then building in intensity like a whisper turning into a warning. The wind slithers through unseen cracks, carrying with it a damp chill that crawls across the floorboards and slips under doors. Somewhere far off, thunder rolls like a slow drumbeat from beneath the earth, distant yet deeply unsettling, as if the storm itself has a pulse. The room you're in feels safe, at least on the surface. A lamp glows dimly in the corner, casting long, hesitant shadows that dance across the walls whenever the lightning outside flares. The power hasn't gone out, not yet, but it flickers now and then, reminding you that you're never far from total darkness. There's a weight in the air, not just from the storm, but from something else, an eerie calm that drapes itself over everything. It's the kind of quiet that makes you listen more carefully, even when there's nothing to hear. You notice the sounds you usually ignore, the creaking of the ceiling as the wind presses against the house, the ticking of a clock that seems louder now, more deliberate, the faint hum of electricity in the walls. You start to realize just how alone you are, and how the rain only makes that solitude feel deeper. It's not just a stormy night. It's a night that feels older than time, like it belongs to a different world, one that doesn't care whether you're awake or asleep, safe or exposed. Outside, the rain lashes against the streets, the roofs, the trees, relentless and untamed. Water runs down the glass in thin, meandering trails, blurring the view into something abstract and strange. Streetlights glow like ghostly eyes through the curtain of rain, but offer no real comfort. If anything, they cast just enough light to show you how empty everything is. No footsteps on the sidewalk, no headlights passing by. Just stillness, just silence, just you and the storm. You wrap yourself tighter in whatever blanket or comfort you have, but it doesn't help much. That feeling, the one that comes in moments like these, starts to settle over you. It's not fear exactly, but something adjacent to it. A sense of being watched, maybe. A sense that something is out there, not in a malicious way, but in the way a predator might observe a rabbit from the underbrush. Patient, curious, silent. The rain has its own rhythm, a language of nature that doesn't always follow logic. Sometimes it slows down for no reason. Sometimes it falls harder when there's no wind at all. And in those strange pauses, between one downpour and the next, the silence seems to stretch out too far, like a void, like the world itself has stopped, waiting for something to happen. Your ears strain in those moments. Are those footsteps on the porch? A branch tapping the window? Or just your imagination playing tricks in the absence of sound? The human brain is always trying to make sense of randomness, to impose meaning where there is none. But sometimes the meaning is already there. You just don't want to admit it. The lights flicker again, and the shadows grow darker, stretch longer. You swear you see movement out of the corner of your eye, but when you turn your head, there's nothing. Just the familiar shapes of your home, distorted slightly by the flickering light and your heightened nerves. But the feeling remains, that sense that something else is in the room, not quite visible, not quite real, but present. These stories weren't crafted by writers or screenwriters seeking a thrill. They came from real people, ordinary individuals with no reason to lie, no book deal to chase, no spotlight to stand in. They told their stories late at night on anonymous forums, in hushed voices to close friends, or in broken whispers to those willing to listen. And all of them began the same way, with something small, something strange, something that could have been ignored if only it hadn't kept happening. It might be a knock on the wall when no one else is home, a strange voice calling your name from a room you just left empty, a fleeting shadow at the edge of your vision, just long enough to make your heart skip, but never long enough to confirm. These people weren't ghost hunters. They didn't live in haunted houses. They had jobs, families, schedules. They didn't believe in the paranormal until it started believing in them. Many of the stories you'll hear tonight are quiet in nature, not full of screams and blood, but of slow building dread that creeps into the corners of your life. A man who kept hearing footsteps in his attic every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., only to discover no animals or entry points. A woman who would wake up every morning to find objects slightly moved in her apartment, as though someone had come in and rearranged her world while she slept. A teenager who found pages torn from her journal scattered around the house, even though she had hidden it in a locked drawer. They all started with confusion. Logical explanations were the first shield: the wind, the house settling, sleep paralysis. But when the events began repeating, when the patterns began forming, that confusion turned to something darker: fear, and eventually acceptance. Acceptance that something was happening to them, something beyond logic. What makes these stories powerful is their rawness. They're not embellished. They don't always have a clear beginning or a satisfying end. Sometimes the events simply stopped one day, leaving the storyteller with more questions than answers. Other times, they escalated until the person had to leave, change their life, or seek help they couldn't easily find. The truth behind these stories doesn't come wrapped in explanations. It lingers in the unresolved, in the unexplained. One man shared a story about a cabin in the woods he inherited from a relative. The first night he stayed there, he heard someone pacing outside around 2 a.m., crunching through the snow. No one was supposed to know he was there. He waited, silent, until the footsteps stopped. In the morning, he found no tracks, just untouched snow all around. He sold the cabin a week later. Another woman spoke of the small apartment she lived in during college. Every time she fell asleep, she'd wake up to find all the lights on. Lamps, ceiling lights, even the ones in rooms she hadn't entered. At first, she thought she was sleepwalking. Until one night, she stayed up deliberately, hiding under a blanket with her phone camera pointed toward the light switch. What she caught in the footage, she's never shared. She moved out 2 days later. Stories like these may sound unbelievable until you realize how many of them there are. From different people, from different parts of the world, with eerily similar details. Things like hearing your name whispered while alone, radios turning on by themselves, sudden cold spots in rooms where no windows are open, dreams that bleed into reality, repeating the same terrifying image across nights. These aren't isolated experiences. These are threads, weaving together a larger invisible pattern, a shared truth, scattered across voices that never meet, yet all echo the same strange fear, that the world we live in has shadows deeper than we know, and sometimes those shadows reach back. The rain begins as a whisper, brushing against the windows like the gentle scratch of fingernails on glass. It's soft at first, barely noticeable, but insistent, like it wants to be heard. As the minutes pass, it grows heavier, cascading down the glass in winding streams that distort the world outside into a shifting, ghostly blur. Each droplet seems to echo slightly, creating a rhythm that fills the air, a constant reminder that something is always moving, just out of sight. The room is dim, lit only by the golden glow of a single lamp in the corner. Its light barely pushes back the shadows that gather at the edges of the space, heavy and still, like thick velvet drapes waiting to be pulled aside. Every corner seems deeper than usual, every shape slightly wrong if looked at too long. The shadows move subtly when you're not paying attention. A trick of the light, or something more. Outside, the thunder rolls again, low and distant. It vibrates through the floor and the walls like a buried growl, traveling through the bones of the house. The lights flicker once, twice, then steady again. But the damage is done. The illusion of safety is cracked, and the silence that follows feels heavier than before. The kind of silence that isn't just quiet, it listens. Inside, the only sounds are your own. The rustling of your clothes as you shift in your seat, the soft exhale from your nose, the faint thud of your heartbeat when you start to notice it. Every creak of the floorboard feels deliberate now. Every sound is sharp, pronounced. You start to hear things you're not sure are real. A subtle tap, a sigh that isn't yours, the feeling that someone has just stepped out of view. Your eyes are drawn to the windows again, though there's nothing to see, just the rain blurring everything into abstraction. But something feels wrong about the reflection. You catch your own movement, sure, but was that all? Did something shift in the background behind you? You look, heart thudding slightly harder, but of course there's nothing there. Just the chair, the wall, the slow creeping shadow from the lamp. The temperature drops slightly, and a draft snakes around your ankles. It's as if the room itself has started to breathe. You can feel the air move, cooler now, heavier with moisture. You swallow. Even that small sound seems too loud, too sudden. The walls feel closer somehow, the ceiling lower. The rain is louder again, a frantic tapping like fingers trying to get in. It becomes difficult to tell if it's outside or coming from the walls themselves. A flash of lightning bathes the room in harsh white for a second. The shadows vanish and everything is revealed in stark detail. Books, furniture, every grain in the wood. Then darkness returns and everything is unfamiliar again. In that brief moment of illumination, you thought you saw something. A shape, a figure, not near you, but across the room, in the corner, where the light doesn't reach. It's gone now, or maybe it was never there, but you felt it, the prickle on your skin, the tightening in your chest, the instinctive knowledge that you were not alone. The silence deepens again, not peaceful, but watchful. Like the moment before a predator moves, your eyes flick back to the shadows. The space seems to shift subtly, edges wavering, as though something behind them is deciding whether to emerge. The shadows stretch longer as the lamp flickers once more, and in the hush between thunder and rain, you hear something else, something breathing in rhythm with your own, from a place just out of reach. There is a unique kind of quiet that settles in when you're truly alone. Not the peaceful solitude of an afternoon nap or a walk in the woods, but the heavier kind, the kind that presses against your chest and makes the air feel too still. The walls of your home, once comforting, start to feel more like a shell, a thin barrier between you and the rest of the world, barely enough to keep the outside from creeping in. When the rain begins to fall and the sky dims into that grey, sullen tone, that shell begins to feel even more fragile. There's no one to call out to, no footsteps from another room, no clatter of dishes in the kitchen, no low hum of conversation. It's just you. The silence becomes sharp, every sound you make cutting through it like a blade. A cough echoes in the air too long. A shuffle of your feet seems to shake the floor. The hum of the refrigerator becomes a soundtrack to your existence, mechanical and cold. In that silence, you begin to realize how exposed you really are. If something were to happen, if you heard a knock at the door, a window opening, a voice that didn't belong, there would be no one to witness it, no one to help, no one to even confirm it was real. You begin to feel how big the house actually is, how many doors it has, how many windows. Every hallway you glance down seems darker than it should be. Every closed door feels like a question. The idea of walking through the house suddenly becomes daunting, like entering a maze with unseen watchers on the other side of every corner. Your own home begins to turn against you, not physically, but psychologically. Every familiar shape begins to feel unfamiliar. The shadows don't move, but they wait. Vulnerability doesn't just come from being alone. It comes from not being believed, from the fear that if you told someone what you're feeling, they'd laugh or brush it off. So you don't say anything. You keep it inside. You question your own senses. Did you really hear a voice whisper your name? Was that knocking just a branch in the wind? Did the hallway light flicker? Or was it just your eyes playing tricks? Doubt becomes your constant companion, but it doesn't bring comfort. It just feeds the unease, turning every moment of uncertainty into a crack in your sanity. At night, the bed that once brought rest becomes a place of tension. You lay still, ears straining in the darkness, blanket pulled tight, not for warmth, but for protection. Every creak of the floor, every whisper of the wind against the walls feels like a test. Your body stays still, but your mind races. You imagine the layout of the room, mapping it in your head so you can tell exactly where something would stand if it were watching you. You tell yourself there's nothing there, but only because you have to. Even daylight doesn't fix it. It only hides it better. The feeling lingers in your chest, subtle but persistent. You go about your day, but you avoid mirrors too long. You keep your back to walls. You close the door when you shower, then open it immediately to make sure nothing changed. You find yourself checking logs more often than usual, not because you think someone is outside, but because you're starting to think something else is inside. The world continues on around you. People walk down the street, cars pass by, but you feel apart from it all, like you're under glass, watching a life that used to feel like yours. And somewhere deep in that silence, in that loneliness, you feel it again. That small, prickling certainty that something is with you, something unseen, something waiting for the right moment when you're most alone, when you're at your most vulnerable. It always begins subtly, so subtly that it's easy to dismiss. A passing feeling, a glance over your shoulder, a quickened heartbeat that doesn't quite match the situation. You tell yourself it's nothing, just your imagination, just the dark playing tricks. But somewhere inside, your instincts are already reacting. The body knows before the mind does. There's something not right, something just beyond the edges of your senses. It might be the way the room feels colder at certain times. Not enough to see your breath, but enough that the hair on your arms raises, and you find yourself reaching for a blanket without knowing why. You check the windows, they're closed. The vents aren't blowing, yet the chill lingers, concentrated in certain corners, like the air is heavier there as if it's being shared. When you're walking down the hallway, you start to notice how the silence changes depending on where you are. Some spaces are normal, still and quiet, but others seem to absorb sound entirely. Your footsteps become muffled. The creak of the floorboard sounds more distant. You stop and listen, but the silence stretches, unnatural, as though something is holding its breath alongside you. You begin to feel the presence, not in a dramatic, movie-like moment, but in the subtle ways that unsettle you. Your eyes are drawn repeatedly to one part of the room, a doorway, a shadowed corner, a chair that always seems to face slightly the wrong direction, no matter how often you fix it. You can't say what's different about it, but you find yourself avoiding that spot. You glance at it quickly, but never for long. Not because you're scared, but because you don't want to become scared. Late at night, you wake up without knowing why. No sound, no dream, just the sudden awareness that you are no longer alone in your sleep. You lie still, staring into the dark, listening. And in those moments, you feel it. Not a touch, not a sound, just presence. As if someone is in the room with you, not moving, not breathing, but watching. Always just behind you. Always just far enough that you can't prove it. Objects don't move in dramatic ways. It's small things. A drawer not fully closed. A light that you're sure was off when you left the room. The TV turning on to static, just once, just for a second, but long enough to freeze your blood. You begin marking things mentally, keeping track of positions, of where your shoes were placed, how the curtains were drawn. It's not paranoia, it's pattern recognition. Something is changing the details around you, slowly, methodically. You catch glimpses sometimes, out of the corner of your eye. A flicker of movement where there should be none. A dark shape retreating into the hallway just as you turn. You stand there staring, waiting for something to move again, but nothing does. The shape is gone, or maybe it was never there. But the sensation remains. That tingling under the skin, that instinctive urge to run without knowing where to. Even in daylight, you catch your reflection behaving oddly, a delay in your movements, an angle that doesn't make sense. Once, just once, you saw a shadow cross behind you in the mirror, but when you turned, the room was empty, completely, utterly empty, yet the image haunts you. You try to forget, but the feeling lingers, the sense that something walks behind you, just close enough to feel its breath on your neck, if it chose to exhale. The atmosphere thickens over time. The air grows stiller. You speak less, as though afraid to draw attention. You leave lights on in rooms you aren't using. You find excuses to stay out, to avoid the stillness of your home. But the feeling follows you. Not always strongly, but just enough to remind you. Whatever it is, it hasn't gone. It's waiting, watching, learning you. The rain hasn't let up. It drums steadily on the roof, tracing a rhythm that blends with the pulse in your ears. Outside, the wind moves through the trees like a whisper, dragging unseen fingers across the glass. Inside, the room feels suspended in time, caught in that fragile place between reality and something else. The shadows haven't grown, but they feel heavier, fuller, as if something is filling them from within. You start to notice the quiet again. Not just silence, but the kind that wraps itself around you like a second skin. It makes you more aware of everything else. The ticking of the clock, the soft creak of the furniture settling, the faint buzz of electricity in the walls. All of it underscores the emptiness, or what you hope is emptiness. You don't want to look behind you, but you do. You always do. Because even though you know there's nothing there, the feeling remains that you're being watched, that your every movement is tracked by something unseen, something standing just outside the border of what you're allowed to perceive. And when you turn, of course, there's nothing. But the fear doesn't go away. It sharpens. Because now you've acknowledged it. Now it knows you've noticed. The The stories you've heard so far, each one carried that same seed, a moment of doubt, a slow realization, a fear that wasn't always loud or sudden, but constant gnawing. Each person who told their tale shared more than just what they saw or heard. They shared that same chill, that same sense of being marked by something. Something that didn't come crashing into their world, but slipped in quietly and made itself at home. You wonder how many people live with that feeling every day. How many lie awake at night, straining to hear footsteps that may never come. How many refuse to speak their fears aloud for worry they'll sound ridiculous. How many people share that strange certainty that they are not alone, and never really were. Maybe it's not about haunted houses or cursed objects. Maybe the stories aren't confined to abandoned places or dark woods. Maybe what's truly unsettling is the idea that the ordinary can be twisted so easily, that the places we feel safest in can turn against us, that the familiar can become unfamiliar without warning, and that once it happens, there's no going back. A small noise catches your attention, a tap, a creak, a breath. It might be nothing. You might not even remember it tomorrow. But tonight, it lingers. Your senses sharpen again. You don't move, don't speak. You just listen. The room feels smaller now, as if it's closing in. The shadows haven't changed, but they seem to lean forward, curious, waiting. You can't shake the feeling that something is in here with you. Not malicious, necessarily, but ancient, patient, aware, like it's been waiting for you to reach this moment, to become still, quiet, alone. You don't know what it wants, only that it knows you're here. And now, it's listening too. So keep the lights low. Keep your blanket pulled close. Let the storm outside drown out the rest of the world. You've already come this far. You've opened the door, even if you didn't mean to. Something has stepped through. Something that thrives in silence, in stories, in the space between words and walls. And now that it's here, now that it's awake, thanks for watching, and until next time.